has always been to use my strength for those that I think are weaker than I am. Why should I be so into myself that I would not care what goes on around me?
Oby Ezekwesili is a powerful woman who has shaped the course of Nigerian history with her intelligence, strength, passion and leadership qualities, and her unflinching resolve to speak up for those who cannot do so for themselves, a trait she learned very early on from her own parents.
One of the key things for me growing up was seeing parents who lived their values. Yes. My dad always said that it is not in pronouncing values, it is in living it. So I saw them live it. And so it was a lot easier. It was a lot easier to not be confused, because part of what happens is, if you are saying to children, don't do certain things, children are pretty intelligent. They can tell that which you're asking them not to do as children is equivalent to something that as an adult you ought not to be doing. Right. So they make those connections, right? And for us, it was that we saw my dad was incredibly a man of integrity, a man of honor, a man of dignity. The words that he often used for us were words that, sort of built the in part of us. So the inward part of us was built up by this sense that values are inestimable. My dad would say, I'd rather be in the home of a gardener than with character than be found in the palace of a person with ignoble wealth. And that for us meant we could look at people and say, oh, without character, it's really not likely that we want to be associated. It doesn't matter what you've got on offer. Yes. So that helped us, even as children, to decide the cycle of friends that we were part of. Our home was a home of values. Mm-hmm. It really was. So people can show their possession. Yes. We can show our values.
Yes, well,
that's our own heritage. That's what we inherited. Because if we didn't know this, we knew it by the time my dad was, getting older and then, he became ill. And then he would say things like, the best gifts that I would leave for you, the education that I've given to you and would continue to be able to give to you. Mm-hmm. Then the values that I've handed to you. Then he would back it up with a threat. He would say, and my name. And if you make the mistake of doing anything to bring disrepute to my name, if I've died, I would come back from the grave and use my walking stick. The way he would say it, my dad was something else. The way he would say it, we knew it was a credible threat. So nobody, even up until this day, I think of my dad and I have that imagery of my dad coming up with.
Ezekwesili has constantly challenged the status quo and made lasting reforms during her career. She was a co-founder of Transparency International, serving as one of the pioneer directors of the global anti-corruption body based in Berlin, Germany. Her motivation for public work has remained unwavering, and throughout it all, with Ezekwesili also serving as Federal Minister of Solid Minerals and then Federal Minister of Education during the second-term presidency of Olusegun Obasanjo. Since then, she served as Vice President of the World Bank Africa's Division from May 2007 to May 2012. I notice in your career, it's taken you all over the world, from Obasanjo administration, pioneering the budget, monitoring and price intelligence unit in the World Bank. But if you walk me through that transition, how did it come about?
So, because I was really into this issue of poor governance, I also began to write a lot about issues of poor governance in the media.
Right.
And, at some point, I was part of all kinds of conversations around the issue of pro-democracy, transparency, accountability, anti-corruption. And from that, I became one of the co-founders of Transparency International in the early 90s. I was one of the 3 youngest of the co-founders of Transparency, because we had founders from around the world. And as I got more into it, I was not just a co-founder. I became one of the pioneer global directors of Transparency, and then I tried to start I started the Nigerian chapter under military rule, which was, totally suicidal to be talking about anti-corruption by civil society at the time of military rule, especially when it then became the time of Abacha. So we focused on those issues. In the meantime, my professional work carried on. I was in the non-bank financial services sector, and I was growing in that because I then left Deloitte and Touche. And so I was doing this parallel track of being this activist for good governance, as well as a professional who was in the operating as a chartered accountant, as a financial person. And then, over time, the civil society part of me took over, that being in the professions. And from that activism, I was actually ultimately forced to getting out to go to the Transparency International office in Berlin. And from Berlin, I then moved on to the US, where I went to the Kennedy School and now drilled deeper into the issues of poor governance, especially as it concerned policy. And as I studied policy, I started also working for Jeffrey Sachs, who is a renowned economist. That activism for good governance, because it was becoming, as one grew older and as one was in the professions and one saw the state of society and how the macro state of governance affected every other thing, I saw much more poverty. I understood poverty even more because I saw it around me. I didn't understand how we could remain poor when we had the kinds of possibilities that we had. And my dad just kept saying, corruption is our greatest problem. Corruption is our greatest problem. Corruption is just an aspect of poor governance. So if you're going to fix anything, you have to get governance right. So that activism, that part of me, I had this passion, we must change this thing, because I had said to my dad something like, when I grow up, I'm going to fight this good poor governance, So it's amazing. I always say to younger people that I mentor, encourage your children to say things.
Yeah.
Some of the things that I said, I just saw me growing in the path. The fact that I was upset about poor governance as a child because of the squalor and the poverty, I found that as I grew as a teenager and I grew as a young professional, it was going in the direction of anything that had to do with promoting good governance. So I recall that by the time we had the Corruption Perception Index, that's the famous instrument that the Transparency International is known for, which ranks countries according to the level of corruption that is perceived to exist in them. And the first CPI, the Corruption Perception Index, it was our country that was perceived as the most corrupt country in the world. And, so the government of head of state Abacha at that time were so angry. They were so angry. Oh my God, the anger, it could, I mean, I faced all kinds of insults for it. They called me Conspiracy International, and that, they sabotaging the country with foreign collaborators, calling your country the perceived most corrupt country. But the fact was that I was mature enough now to see that, you got to do something about this. Mm-hmm. We really needed to do something about it.
When the aftermath of nearly 276 girls were abducted from Chibok by the Islamist militant group of Boko Haram, Ezekwesili advocated for Nigerians all over the world to come together, to act and make a stand against this injustice. Ezekwesili was instrumental to the start of the viral hashtag Bring Back Our Girls campaign on social media, which trended internationally and contributed to making the Chibok girls a constant topic in the media, and contributed in no small part to the release of 82 Chibok girls to date. So you were one of the first people to speak up against the injustice of the Chibok girls, and that really was literally the catalyst that led to the global Bring Back Our Girls movement. Now talk to me about the day, and if possible, what was going through your mind at the time where you found out what had happened? What stimulated the reaction?
The outrage for me was deep. I saw it by virtue of the tweet by BBC, and if you went on Twitter and did a search, you would find it. I saw a storified version of my tweets on Chibok girls recently, and they had over 100 school girls taken from a secondary school in Borno State, Nigeria, and I responded to them. I said verified. Then I followed on with a second tweet that said, I hope this story is not true. This is very disturbing. I just hope that the government can speak quickly on this. And then I continued to tweet because I got agitated. My thought was swelling with a lot of anxiety. And now I say to people that what was going on with me at that time was the unleashing of the frustration that I felt when February of the same year, 29 boys had been slaughtered at the federal government college, Boni Yadi, and they were burnt and their shared remains were put on the internet. And it was a school that I had known because I had been Minister of Education. It was nothing about any, the parents of those who were these children. Nobody told us. They just, just numbers. Nothing. And society was just moving on. And, it was too painful for me. I never thought I would see a Nigeria where that would be like a normal thing. Mm-hmm. We had normalized the abnormal. So when I moved on, I didn't realize that I felt a sense of disappointment even in myself. That, so after 1 week, what next? Mm-hmm. You also just had to carry on with your life. Mm-hmm. Was not up to 2 months after Chibok girls became victims. The same people that had done that gruesome act to Boni Yadi boys went to the school and carried these girls. So when I saw that news, I was like, no. Yes. No, not again. No. So if you check my timeline on Twitter, from that 15th when that news broke, up until today, it's been about Chibok girls. Because I said, I'm putting a marker on the sand. This time around, I am not moving on. This society must act to dignify the lives of her citizens, especially the ones that we send off to school. The basis of greatness of nations is not what they have underneath their soil. The basis of greatness of nations is what the citizens have in their mind, their brain. It's about the human capital of a people. So how come we have such disregard of the lives of our people, especially our children? And I thought, no, this is not right. This cannot be right. I saw that during the Civil War. We didn't learn any lessons. Are we saying that the dignity of the human life continues to mean nothing to us? We're ready to pretend that nothing is happening? And for me, Chibok girls resonated very much. Part of the education reforms when I was Minister of Education was to narrow the gap between girls in school and boys in school. And the zone in Nigeria with the least number of girls in school is the Northeast zone, was and still is. And our reform had focused on achieving more girls in school. So a young woman at that time, Aisha Umar, Waziri Umar, was my anchor team leader for doing that part of the reform for us. It was focused on Borno State, Yobe State, and Adamawa State. And I was thinking to myself, so some of these kinds of initiative encouraging parents to send their girls to school, then these parents sent girls to school. They go to school and are taken by terrorists, and the country wants to pretend that it is okay. So I said, no. I said, there's no way I'm going to be part of a society that would do that.
Yes.
And so I decided that I was going to continue to talk, because I found it strange that our presidency did not acknowledge that this thing had happened.
Yes.
After a while of my disturbing on Twitter, the military came out and said something like they had rescued all the girls that were taken in from some school, only about 8 of them are not accounted for. And then I celebrated, only for it to be that voices came from the state saying, no, parents are still crying, they've not seen their daughters. So the Nigerian military was forced to recant that, oh, they were sorry, they got a false alert that the girls had been rescued. It was not so, they are continuing to search. So I said, oh, we have no time for recriminations here. Just keep pursuing these people to get the girls back. Because in my mind, I was thinking, if these girls, my God, you know what could happen to a girl with savages? Oh my God, I was so agitated. So my timeline was only about Chibok girls from that 15th. It was on the 23rd that the phrase, bring back our girls, happened.
Did you anticipate that the size of the reaction that would happen or that would follow that hashtag?
Oh my God, it was amazing because you see, between that period of the 23rd and the 30th when we did the march, the hashtag Bring Back Our Girls was all over the internet. Globally, people were, people were curious. I mean, nobody had ever heard that this number of girls were taken from any school around the world. So it was quite something that touched people. And then it was so shocking because girls And the world's been going on about girls' education. So it really was quite a story that people followed, But what was very, very strange was that domestically, meaning in Nigeria, the media was saying nothing. The Nigerian media was not reporting anything about the girls. We now know why. They were mooted by the same government that refused to acknowledge that anything had happened. So it was an orchestrated situation. But because of social media, we were actively talking about the girls.
Was there a point where you thought that despite the amount of attention you were bringing to this case, they may never get found? Was there a point from when it happened to recently where you felt like maybe these girls are gone?
I understand your question. Within the first month of the girls not being found, not being rescued, and the general tardiness as well as squabbles, and there was now all kinds of politics around the issue of the girls. I frankly couldn't weave my head around the way that the girls just seemed to be like casualties of some, political conversation that was going on between the ruling party at that time and the party in opposition, which is now the ruling party. And all I kept saying is, these girls don't care what party you belong to. These are children of poor people in a place called Chibok. I'm not even sure they know the acronyms of parties. They are girls that went to school. Can we focus on the fact that these girls are missing? Can we get government to do what it should do so that these girls would be found and returned to their parents? And the more that the conversation went, the more that we spent time trying to get the government to look at the matter of the girls, not the matter of the politics that was going on between they and the other party, the more we got drawn into, being put on the defensive. Yeah. They were like, oh, the only reason you're making all this noise about these girls is because you're part of the other party. And I'm thinking, since when did Oby Ezekwesili become someone to be associated with party politics? Nobody who knows, they know that I have no stomach for their party politics. So for us, it was that girls were in trouble and the government needed to act and act decisively. But in the course of that animosity toward the advocacy, that was a purely empathy-driven advocacy, an advocacy that was purely an advocacy anchored on social contract between those that govern and those they govern. Because as citizens, we were saying, you have accountability for Chibok girls. Where are the girls? They went to school. We should do right by them. We should give them justice of rescue. The more that we said that, the more that we got insulted, the more that I personally was slandered, I was assaulted, there was nothing.
As in physically assaulted?
Yes. Thugs were sent to the Unity Fountain to beat us up. They broke the chairs, they pushed. It was this. That for me was one of the lowliest days of my country, because I couldn't reconcile the fact that if daughters of this country are taken away by terrorists, it should be something that would unite us. It should unite us. The grief, the pain, the anger should unite us. Those days strengthened my resolve, because I sort of said, what would my dad expect me to do at this moment of a pushback on the values that I hold there? I hold there the values that these girls are as entitled to justice of rescue as any other elite in this society that was ever abducted or kidnapped, and the government did everything to bring them back. Amina Ali Nkeki was the first Chibok girls. She was found because she had escaped from the camp when there was some raid by the military. The civilian vigilante were walking around the path and they saw Amina Linkeki with a child, and this, in questioning her, she said she's from Chibok. And they said, Chibok, are you? And she said, yes, that she's one of the girls that had been taken from the school in Chibok. Her return simply was a validation that our standing for them up until that time was not in vain. For Amina Linkeki's, recovery, we thought, okay, especially when Amina Linkeki said, we were all together. The other girls are still there. And we thought, we're glad we didn't stop. Now, we must stand to the end.
From fighting gender inequalities in the education system, to creating an index that measures the degree of corruption in a nation, to being a policy advisor to a number of high-profile international organizations, Ezekwesili is a powerful force for change and establishing groundbreaking initiatives that have consistently contributed to the well-being of Nigeria, a place she loves dearly and will fight and stop at nothing to protect those who cannot fight for themselves against the odds.
I love a society where the weakest amongst us can become the strongest for us.